When people think of Disney's 1961 classic The Parent Trap, they usually picture a lighthearted family comedy filled with charm, laughter, and a young actress who seemed to hold the entire movie together. At only 14 years old, Hayley Mills was one of the brightest child stars in Hollywood, adored by fans around the world and personally guided by Walt Disney himself. On screen, the film gave audiences the picture of a happy family and a loving father played by Brian Keith. But behind the scenes, the story was far more complicated. Hayley Mills later confessed that she utterly hated her on-screen father, and the reasons why open a window into the clash of two very different worlds. To understand how this tension developed, we need to look at the lives of both Mills and Keith, two people shaped by very different experiences who found themselves colliding under the bright lights of a Disney set. Hayley Catherine Rose Vivian Mills was born on April 18, 1946, into one of the most respected acting families in Britain. Her father, Sir John Mills, was a famous actor, and her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, was a successful writer and playwright. Her older sister Juliet also became an actress, making the Mills family a household name in the entertainment world. But Hayley's childhood was not spent in busy London or among flashing cameras. Instead, she grew up on a large 400-acre dairy farm in the quiet countryside of Sussex. This peaceful upbringing gave her a sense of safety and love that would later contrast sharply with the harsher world of Hollywood. Her entry into acting almost seemed like fate. At just 12 years old, director J. Lee Thompson visited her father to discuss a new movie, Tiger Bay. The role was written for a boy, but Thompson noticed young Hayley playing in the garden and saw something special in her. Impressed by her natural charm, he offered her the role without even asking for a screen test. The decision changed her life forever. Her performance in Tiger Bay was a sensation, winning her a British Academy Award for Most Promising Newcomer. Suddenly, this farm girl found herself in the international spotlight, her career taking off faster than she could have ever imagined. Hayley might have returned to her studies after Tiger Bay, but destiny had other plans. Walt Disney's wife, Lillian, happened to see the film one afternoon in London while hiding from the rain. She was so impressed that she urged her husband to meet this young actress. Disney, who was struggling to find the perfect lead for his next big movie, Pollyanna, flew to London and met Hayley and her parents at the luxurious Dorchester Hotel. Without hesitation, he offered her a 5-year, 6-picture contract. Again, without a single screen test. Almost overnight, Hayley Mills became a global superstar. Her role in Pollyanna in 1960 earned her a special Juvenile Academy Award, the last one ever presented. She was now Disney's crown jewel, carefully protected, mentored, and surrounded by warmth. The studio was more than just a workplace for her. It was like a second home. Walt Disney himself became a father figure, shielding her from the darker sides of Hollywood and making sure she always felt safe. For Hayley, Disney represented stability and kindness, a bubble of innocence that seemed unshakable. But the bubble would not last forever. By the time she was cast in The Parent Trap, she was stepping into an environment where her safe and gentle world would crash headlong into the toughness of her co-star, Brian Keith. Brian Keith was born on November 14, 1921, in Bayonne, New Jersey, also into a show business family. His father, Robert Keith, was an actor, and his mother, Helena Shipman, was a stage actress. But unlike the Mills family, Brian's early life was filled with instability. His parents divorced when he was still a child, and tragedy struck when his stepmother, actress Peg Entwistle, ended her life by jumping from the Hollywood sign. By the time he was a teenager, Brian had already seen more darkness than most children his age. But it was his service during World War II that truly defined his character. At just 19, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he was sent to boot camp and later became a radio operator and tail gunner in a dive bomber. He saw heavy combat in the South Pacific, flying dangerous missions in what Marines grimly called the Valley of Death. For his bravery, he received the Air Medal, but the war left permanent marks on him. Returning to civilian life, he pursued acting, but his screen presence was shaped by his experiences. Unlike Hayley, who radiated innocence, Brian specialized in tough, no-nonsense roles: cowboys, soldiers, and hardened men. Off-screen, he was blunt, unsentimental, and had little patience for what he considered nonsense. He carried himself with the discipline of a Marine, a man of action who spoke his mind freely. When he stepped onto the carefully controlled set of a Disney film, he was stepping into a world that clashed with everything he knew. By 1961, Hayley Mills was the heart and soul of The Parent Trap. The movie depended entirely on her ability to convince audiences that she was not one girl but two, identical twins named Susan and Sharon. To pull off this illusion, Disney used advanced techniques for the time, including the sodium vapor process and split-screen filming. These methods demanded absolute precision. Every scene often had to be shot twice, once as one twin and then again as the other, while she acted opposite a stand-in named Susan Henning. Even the slightest mistake, like missing a mark by an inch, could ruin the effect. On top of the technical challenges, Haley had to master two different American accents, one Californian and one Bostonian, often switching back and forth within the same scene. The work was exhausting for anyone, let alone a 14-year-old still figuring out her place in Hollywood. She needed patience, encouragement, and kindness from those around her. But Brian Keith was not that person. He brought his Marine-trained efficiency to the set, preferring spontaneity and quick takes rather than endless rehearsals. For him, acting was a job to be finished, not a delicate process requiring repetition. This clashed directly with the film's technical needs and Haley's learning curve. Each time she needed another take or stumbled through her accents, Brian's frustration grew. His bluntness, which worked well with adult co-stars, cut deeply into the confidence of a sensitive teenager. To audiences, Brian Keith's character in The Parent Trap was warm, charming, and the kind of father every child wished for. But behind the cameras, Haley Mills felt the opposite. It was not one single argument or dramatic fight that caused her to hate him. Instead, it was the constant, grinding sense that she was unwelcome in his presence. Rumors spread that Keith mockingly called her the Golden Goose, a cruel jab at her favored position in the Disney studio. Some crew members recalled him rolling his eyes when she asked questions or interrupting her at table reads. Unconfirmed whispers even suggested moments of explosive anger, such as him slamming a chair after a scene went wrong. Whether or not these rumors were true, the damage for Haley was real. She was a shy girl under enormous pressure, already struggling with the expectations placed on her as Disney's perfect child star. Brian's impatience made her feel smaller, weaker, and constantly judged. Years later, she described it simply: he was difficult. He made it very clear I wasn't welcome in his space. Those words capture the emotional wound more than any single incident could. For Haley, Brian Keith became a symbol of the cold, dismissive adult world she had been sheltered from. What makes this story more complex is that not everyone saw Brian Keith the way Haley Mills did. To some co-stars, he was warm, professional, and even fatherly. Maureen O'Hara, who played Haley's mother in the film, admired him greatly and worked with him on multiple projects, even personally choosing him as her co-star in another movie. Kathy Garver, who starred with him years later on the TV show Family Affair, described him as both macho and sensitive, a man with a big heart. How could the same man inspire hatred in one young actress and admiration in others? The answer lies in perspective. Brian Keith was a 39-year-old war veteran, hardened by life, used to working with adults who could handle his blunt style. Haley, on the other hand, was just 14, coming from a sheltered Disney environment where kindness and patience were the rule. What O'Hara experienced as rugged professionalism, Haley felt as personal cruelty. Keith failed to adapt his style to the needs of a child actor, and the result was lasting bitterness. The tension on The Parent Trap did not fade with the final cut of the film. For Haley Mills, the experience left scars that shaped the rest of her career. She grew tired of being seen only as Disney's wholesome child star, trapped in an image that left her little room to grow. Disney even blocked her from roles in more mature films like Lolita and Exodus, determined to preserve her innocent reputation. Once her contract ended, she made bold choices to break free from that image. In 1966, she starred in The Family Way, a British drama that included a controversial nude scene. Audiences who still saw her as Pollyanna were shocked. But for Haley, it was a way of proving she was no longer a child and no longer willing to be dismissed. In many ways, her frustration with Brian Keith symbolized the larger battle she faced, breaking away from being treated as small or unimportant, and showing the world that she was a serious actress in her own right. Being a child star in Hollywood has always come with a heavy price, and Haley Mills's experience was no different. While audiences saw a cheerful young girl living a dream life at Disney, the truth was that much of her childhood was sacrificed for the camera. Unlike other kids her age, Haley didn't spend her days in classrooms, playgrounds, or hanging out with friends. Instead, she worked long hours memorizing lines, performing scenes, and dealing with adult-level pressures. Studios often expected child actors to behave like professionals, but they rarely gave them the emotional support that children needed. This created a strange double life, one where kids carried the responsibilities of adults while still struggling with the insecurities of childhood. Haley's clash with Brian Keith shows how fragile that balance was. For her, every harsh word or impatient glance could feel like a crushing weight. Because she was not just performing, but also trying to prove herself worthy in an industry that could be cruel to even the most talented. What made things even harder for Haley was the advanced technology Disney used in The Parent Trap. The split-screen effect, which allowed her to play twins interacting with each other, was groundbreaking at the time. But for Haley, it meant working twice as hard as any other actor on set. She had to repeat every scene 2 times, switching roles while keeping the timing, expressions, and emotions perfectly matched. The cameras and crew demanded precision, and even the smallest mistake could ruin a shot. To make things more complicated, Haley often had to act with stand-ins or empty spaces, imagining her other twin was there. For a young girl, this was mentally exhausting. Brian Keith, already frustrated by the technical delays, didn't always have the patience for the slow process. His quick temper clashed with Haley's exhaustion, and what might have been minor disagreements soon grew into a larger tension on set. While Haley felt overwhelmed and even hurt by Brian Keith's sharp personality, it's also important to understand his perspective. Keith was a seasoned actor, known for his rugged charm and no-nonsense attitude. By the time he filmed The Parent Trap, he was already used to fast-paced productions and adult co-stars who could keep up with him. Working on a family film with complicated technical effects and a child actor in a double role was frustrating for him. His gruff remarks may not have been personal attacks on Haley, but simply the way he expressed stress. Other co-stars described him as witty, dependable, and even fatherly in his own way. This shows that the conflict between him and Haley wasn't just about personality, but also about circumstance. The mismatch between a sensitive child and a blunt adult. Actor created friction that left a lasting mark on Haley's memory of the film. Disney Studios in the early 1960s had a reputation for creating magical films, but behind the scenes, things were far less enchanting. Child actors like Haley were valuable assets for the company, and while Disney promoted them as beloved stars, the studio's strict schedules often pushed them to their limits. Filming was carefully controlled, with little room for mistakes or personal struggles. Directors demanded perfection, especially when new technologies were involved. Walt Disney himself had high expectations, and while he admired Haley's talent, the pressure of being a Disney girl was heavy. Any weakness, hesitation, or complaint could be seen as unprofessional, even though Haley was still just a child. In this environment, even a small clash with a co-star like Brian Keith could feel overwhelming. Disney films looked like warm family stories on screen, but for the actors, they sometimes came at the cost of personal comfort and emotional well-being. For Haley Mills, the experience of filming The Parent Trap stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. In interviews years later, she admitted that Brian Keith's behavior left her feeling small and unworthy at times. She remembered the exhaustion of playing both twins and the sting of working with a co-star who didn't seem to appreciate her struggles. Yet, despite the pain, she also learned resilience. Haley continued to work in films, and even returned to Disney for other projects, though she eventually stepped away from Hollywood to focus on her personal life. Brian Keith, meanwhile, built a respected career in television and film, remembered as a tough but beloved actor. For him, the tension with Haley may have been just another part of the job. But for her, it was a defining moment that revealed the darker side of being a young star in a demanding industry. Looking back, the story of Haley Mills and Brian Keith in The Parent Trap is not just about two actors who didn't get along. It is a reflection of how Hollywood, even during its most magical years, often overlooked the emotional needs of its youngest stars. Haley's vulnerability and Brian's bluntness clashed in a way that revealed the hidden costs of entertainment. While audiences laughed at the clever tricks of twins swapping places, Haley carried the weight of playing both roles, and of feeling unsupported when she needed kindness the most. Today, the film remains a classic, but the behind-the-scenes story adds depth to its legacy. It reminds us that the bright smiles on screen often hide unseen struggles, and that the people who create our favorite films are far more complicated than the characters they play.